we were having a look at the ICC rules applicable to documentary credits, the UCPDC 600. We were trying to fast review the articles. Insurance document, insurance policy, insurance certificate, declaration under open cover. It can be any of them called as insurance document. They must appear to have been issued and signed by the insurance company or the underwriter or the proxy or the agents. The insurance document should appear to be issued and signed by the insurance company or underwriter or proxy or agents. Agent or proxy should say that they are acting for whose behalf. Agent or proxy should say they are acting for whose behalf. All originals must be submitted. Cover notes are not acceptable. Broker should sign as agent for the insurance company. Insurance policy in lieu of insurance certificate or declaration under open cover is acceptable. Insurance policy is a jumbo document and it is acceptable in lieu of insurance certificate or a declaration under open cover. It should be dated on or before the shipment date. Insurance policy should be dated on or before the shipment date or should evidence the effective date. The document should indicate the amount of insurance and currency. Document should indicate the amount of insurance and currency. The DC, if the documentary credit requires insurance for a minimum cover or if the documentary credit is silent, then 110% is the minimum of the gross value of the shipment, that is a requirement. If the credit is silent or the credit requires for minimum cover, then 110% of the gross value of the invoice is the minimum requirement. 110% of the gross value of the invoice is a minimum requirement. The insurance document should indicate the risks covered and the cover effective from place of dispatch to the place of destination. Insurance policy should indicate the risk covered, the effective date of insurance, and the cover should be effective from place of dispatch to the final destination. Documentary credit should state the type of insurance required. When all risk cover is called for, the insurance document is acceptable with quote unquote all risk, irrespective of the fact that many risks are excluded. The insurance document may contain exclusion clauses, for example, war risk not covered or piracy risk not covered. Insurance document may indicate cover is subject to franchise or excess, which means in case of a 5% franchise and excess, the risk over and above 5% only will be considered by the insurance company. Expiry and tolerance. The expiry date of the documentary credit is the last date for presentation. The expiry date of the documentary credit is the last date for presentation. Every credit should have an expiry date. If the expiry date falls on a non-banking day for reasons other than force majeure, presentation will be allowed on the next business day. If the documentary credit expires on a non-business day for reasons other than force majeure, presentation will be allowed on the next business day. If such a presentation is made to the nominated bank should certify in their covering schedule to the issuing bank that presentation was allowed on the next business day because the credit expired on a non-banking day. The last date for the shipment will not be expired because it is on a non-banking day or a holiday. Tolerance. When the word about or approximately is used, it means 10% more or 10% less with respect to the amount or the unit price or the quantity. When the words about or approximate is used in a documentary credit, it means 10% plus or minus with respect to the amount or the quantity or the unit price to whatever it is applicable. If the amount is about, then 10% is applicable only to the amount and not to quantity and not to price. If the documentary credit is silent about the tolerance, up to 5% more or less in quantity is allowed in case the quantity is not in number of countable units and the credit does not stipulate that the drawing should not exceed the credit amount. As long as the documentary credit does not say drawings should not exceed the credit amount and the quantity should not be exceeded or reduced, if the quantity is not in countable number of units, 10 car or 100 shirts, up to 5% more or less in quantity is allowed. But the drawing cannot be more than the credit value. Even if when partial shipments are not allowed, a claim can be present under the documentary credit for up to 5% less than the documentary credit amount. 94, 95, 93% of the documentary credit amount can be claimed if the quantity is shipped in full, the unit price is indicated as stated in the credit, no tolerance is applicable, and the 5% more or less quantity has not been availed. up to 5% less than the documented credit amount can be claimed under the documented credit, and it will not be considered as partial shipment provided tolerance clause does not apply, up to 5% more or less in quantity is not applied, unit price is indicated as stated in the credit, and the quantity indicated in the credit is shipped in full. Partial shipments and installment shipments. Partial drawings and partial shipments are allowed. Partial drawings and partial shipments are allowed. More than one set of transport document is not considered as a partial shipment. More than one set of transport document is not considered as a partial shipment when the goods are moving by the same means of conveyance on the same journey indicating the same destination. More than one set of transport document is not considered a partial shipment when goods are moving on the same means of conveyance on a same journey indicating the same destination, even if different dates of shipment are indicated in the transport document or different ports of loading are indicated. Multiple transport document, if submitted, cannot be considered as partial shipment even if different dates of shipment and different ports of loading are indicated, provided the goods are moving on the same conveyance on the same journey indicating the same destination. Sorry. The latest date of such transport document will be considered as a shipment date. When more than one transport document is issued covering shipment on more than one means of conveyance, it is considered as a partial shipment. When shipment is more than one means of conveyance, it is considered as a partial shipment even if they leave the same day for the same destination. When more than one transport document is issued, if it is in the same means of conveyance, it is not considered as a partial shipment. But if it is in the different means of conveyance, it is considered as a partial shipment even if they leave on the same day for the same destination. Which means 10 trucks going on the same day to the same destination does not make it not partial. It is partial shipment. But one ship but loaded on different port and a different transport document issued on different dates, it does not become partial because the ship is going to reach on the same journey to the same destination. More than one courier receipt or post receipt is not a partial shipment provided they leave the same place on the same date by the same courier company or a postal agency. More than one courier receipt or postal receipt is not partial shipment provided it is stamped and signed by the same agency and leaves the same place on the same date for the same destination. Drawing or shipment by installment. If the credit provides for drawing or shipment by installment, if any installment is not drawn or shipped, credit ceases to be available for subsequent installments. If the credit allows drawing by installments and if any installment is not shipped or drawn, credit ceases to be available for further shipments. Bank has no obligation to accept documents outside the banking hours. Bank has no obligation outside the banking hours. Banks assume no responsibility or liability for the form, sufficiency, accuracy or genuineness of any documents. Banks assume no responsibility or liability for the form, sufficiency, accuracy or genuineness of any documents. Banks are not liable or responsible for the description of the goods, quantity of the goods, quality of the goods, delivery of goods or existence of goods. Banks are not liable or responsible for quantity, description, quality, delivery, value or existence of goods. Banks are not liable or responsible for the solvency or performance of the carrier or the consignee or the insurer. Banks are not liable or responsible for the solvency or performance of the carrier or the insurer or the consignee. Banks assume no liability or responsibility for the consequences of delay, loss in transit, mutilation or error in transmission. When a letter of credit is transmitted, banks are not liable for the delays, loss in transit, mutilation or error in transmission. When a credit, this is irrespective of the fact that credit demands or the bank on its own choice took the initiative. Irrespective of the fact that whether the nominated bank purchased or prepaid or honored or negotiated, issuing bank has to reimburse the nominated bank if the compliant documents has been forwarded. Issuing bank has to reimburse the nominated bank if complying documents has been forwarded, even if the documents have been lost in transit. Issuing bank or the confirming bank has to reimburse the nominated bank if complying documents has been forwarded, even if they are lost in transit. Banks are not liable for translation or interpretation. Banks assume no liability for translation of translation from another language. Banks assume no responsibility for interpretation of technical terms. Banks assume no liability or responsibility for interruption of business by acts of God. Banks are not liable or responsible for interruption of their business beyond their control. And upon resumption of business, they will not honor an expired credit. Upon resumption of business, banks are not liable or responsible to honor an expired credit. In case a bank's business is interrupted by reasons beyond their control, upon resumption of business, they are not liable to honor a credit that expired during the period of force majeure. Banks are not liable or responsible for the form, sufficiency, accuracy, or genuineness of the document, for the description, quantity, quality, delivery, value, or existence of the goods, for the solvency or performance of the carrier, consignor, or insurer, for the delay, loss in transit, mutilation, or error in transmission, for the documents that are lost in transit, for translation of another language or interpretation of technical term, or for honoring a presentation that has been for an LC that expired during interruption of business for reasons beyond the control of the bank. Charges. Banks utilizing services of another bank do so at the request of or on the account of and for the risk of the instructing party. So the applicant has to indemnify and pay the charges. Banks utilizing services of another bank do so at the risk of the applicant. Banks assume no liability if the instructions are not carried out. Banks are not responsible if the instructions are not carried out by the nominated bank or the advising bank. Banks are liable to pay the fees to the instructed party for carrying out the instructions. Banks are liable to pay the fees to the instructed party for the instructions being carried out. If charges are to beneficiary's account and if it could not be collected, issuing bank has to reimburse and applicant has to indemnify. If the charges are to beneficiary's account and various banks could not collect, issuing bank has to reimburse and applicant has to indemnify. The instrument, either the documented credit or the amendment, should not say that the advising is conditional to the receipt of advising charges. The credit or the amendment should not say that advising is subject to receipt of advising charges. Applicant is bound to indemnify for the impact of the foreign laws and usages. Applicant is bound to indemnify for all obligations on the banks imposed by foreign law and usages. Assignment. Beneficiary has a right to assign any proceeds. It does not depend on transferability. The beneficiary's right to assign the proceeds under a documented credit does not depend on the transferability of the documented credit. Beneficiary may assign proceeds to which they may become entitled to. Beneficiary may assign the proceeds to which they may become entitled to under the documented credit. Assignment is or will be in accordance with the applicable local law. Assignment is and will be in accordance with the applicable local law. It does not mean assignment of right to perform. It does not mean assignment of right to perform. It only means assignment of proceeds if any. It only means assignment of proceeds if any that the beneficiary becomes entitled to against a complying presentation. Assignment can be made only to the proceeds if any that becomes entitled by the applicant beneficiary for a complying presentation. Assignment cannot be made for the right to perform. The right to present a document cannot be assigned. The right to ship cannot be assigned. The right to draw cannot be assigned. Transfer. No obligation to effect a transfer. No bank has any obligation to effect a transfer except in the manner consented by it. No bank has any obligation to effect a transfer except in the manner consented by it. Transfer is possible only if the credit states it is transferable. The words divisible is not enough. The credit should state it is transferable. It can be made available in part to one or more second beneficiary. A transferable credit can be made available in parts to one or more second beneficiary at the request of the first beneficiary. Transferring bank is a bank that transfers the credit, and transferred credit is the one that is made available by the transferring bank to the second beneficiary. All charges are to the account of the first beneficiary. A credit may not be transferred more than once. The credit cannot be transferred from second penny to third penny. A transfer of the credit from the second beneficiary back to the first beneficiary is not prohibited. Transfer from second penny back to first penny is not prohibited. Transfer to multiple second penny is allowed in case partial shipments are permitted. Transfer to multiple second beneficiaries is allowed in case partial shipments are transmitted. If a credit is transferred to second beneficiary and the second beneficiary transfers back to the first beneficiary, it can again be transferred to a different second beneficiary. rejection of an amendment by one second beneficiary does not affect the acceptance of the amendment by other second beneficiaries. The transferred credit should reflect the terms and the transferable credit. The transferred credit should reflect the terms of the transferable credit, except that the amount can be changed, the unit price can be changed, the expiry date can be changed, the presentation date can be changed, the shipment date can be changed, and the insurance can be increased. The transferred credit should reflect the terms of the transferable credit, except for the fact that amount, unit price, expiry date, presentation period, and shipment date can be curtailed and insurance can be increased. Name of the first beni can be substituted to that of the applicant. First beni has the right to substitute their own invoices and drafts. Name of the first beni can be substituted to that of applicant. First beni has the right to substitute their own invoices and drafts. First beni may request the credit to be made available to the beneficiary's bank. In case a second beni presents a document to the transferring bank and the first beni refuses to substitute the invoices or draft, or substitutes a discrepant set of documents, transferring bank has a right to send second beni's document directly to the issuing bank. In case a transferring bank receives the documents from the second beneficiary's bank and the first beneficiary refuses to substitute invoice and draft promptly or substitutes a discrepant document, the transferring bank has a right to send second beneficiary's document directly to the issuing bank. The credit can be transferred only to the extent consented by the transferring bank and be made available in parts to one or more second beneficiary, and cannot be made further transfer from second to third or other beneficiaries that can be transferred back and retransferred to a different second beneficiary. What are the liabilities of the confirming bank? Confirming bank must honor. Confirming bank should act as if they are the issuing bank. Confirming bank must honor even if for a wrongful dishonor of the issuing bank. Confirming bank's liability is same as that of the issuing bank because the confirmation is a separate undertaking between the confirming bank and the beneficiary, in addition to different and separate from the undertaking between the issuing bank and the beneficiary. Confirming bank is irrevocably bound upon ordinary confirmation, and issuing bank undertakes to reimburse the nominated bank for the rightful honor, and provided stipulated documents are presented, confirming bank has to pay at sight or incur a deferred payment undertaking or accept a draft and pay on the maturity, or in case of wrongful dishonor by the issuing bank or a nominated bank, pay at sight or incur or honor or negotiate as what the other bank failed to carry out. What is assignment? The beneficiary has a right to assign any proceeds to which he may become entitled to in accordance with the provisions of the applicable law. Assignment of proceeds and not assignment of right to perform. Whether or not the credit is transferable, assignment can be made. Terms such as divisible, fractionable, assignable, transmissible do not render the credit as transferable. So here we come to the end of the session. Thanks for watching these videos. Hope you had a quick review, a very fast look at the various UCP 600 rules that apply to documented credits.